Okay, so welcome again to our Sangha Day celebration. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Suddhayu, and I'm the manager.
And then some.
I have a lot of notes for my talk today, more than I would usually. I usually do more sort of riffing off of really basic notes in my talk. But I wanted to be really careful today. You'll see why. I wanted to be really careful today. And so I'm going to be reading my notes a little more than I usually would. And if you notice me diverging from my notes, just give me a look. Give me a look.
How will we know?
Because I'm trying to keep this brief as well. And the title of the talk is The Sangha as a Force for Good in the World. And I came up with this theme in relation to what we're doing on Tuesday nights in our weekly Tuesday gatherings, where the theme has been Buddhism and world peace. So we are continuing to expand on that theme today. Buddhism as a path that has an impact not only on our inner world, but on our outer world as well. So I have been talking with a lot of people post-election, both within the Sangha and without the Sangha. And I've noticed a variety of responses. Some people in my circles are pleased. Some people have sort of shrugged the results, and they have more of a let's wait and see what happens sort of an attitude. And quite a few people, most people in my circles, have expressed some degree of grief and fear as to what's to come next. In times of uncertainty, it can be easy to polarize. It can be easy even to express hate. It can be easy to fear. It can also be easy to try and ignore the problems that we share and to engage in various forms of escapism. Our Buddhist teachings encourage us to resist those impulses which are expressions of the poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, and to have confidence in our practice as Buddhists to navigate difficult terrain and to help others navigate difficult terrain. Our sense of the three jewels as refuge, the three jewels being the Buddha as the ideal of human enlightenment, the Dharma as the path to awakening, and the Sangha, the spiritual community of those who have awakened and those who are supporting each other in awakening. Our sense of these three jewels as refuge is crucial for our individual and collective practice. Refuge gives us a sense of belonging, of home, of steadiness, of purpose in the face of the worldly winds of pleasure and pain, of fame and infamy, of praise and blame, and of gain and loss. Spiritual friendship and Sangha are always crucially important to our evolution as Buddhists. But they feel even more important when we are experiencing difficulty or uncertainty. This could be even harder if you're a member of a Sangha who might be the target of political hatred. The so-called culture wars can leave some people feeling very vulnerable and frightened. There were already post-election videos circulating of Latin American people being hatefully harassed in public People of color attending retreats at Aryaloka have been yelled at from car windows in the streets of Newmarket. This has happened on more than one occasion. So this isn't something far away. This is something in our neighborhood. So I think as Sangha members, we need to look out for each other. We need to look out for anyone in our Sangha who may have been the target of hateful political speech, and to check in with those friends if we haven't seen them in a while, and to offer our support. And we need to keep in mind that some see non-Christians as problematic as well. And with the rise in our country of Christian nationalism, we need to be watchful for each other in that sense too. Because Buddhists and other non-Christians could also be the targets of political hatred. Our Sangha exists within a wider world, a wider community, and we as individuals can often feel responsive to that wider community as Buddhists. And we can find ourselves asking or noticing what we are called to do in the world to respond to that suffering. But before we get more into that, first of all, we have to clarify something. So when we talk about Aryaloka, we're often talking about different things. Aryaloka is a nonprofit religious organization. That's its legal standing. Aryaloka is also a place. It's these beautiful buildings and these grounds, which have so many good associations with. And then there's Aryaloka as a Sangha. This is the secret third thing, as the meme goes. Aryaloka is a Sangha. And a Sangha is a spiritual community, which, where does it exist? It exists in friendships, it exists in communication, and it exists in cooperative work. It exists at a different plane of reality than the clunky old buildings or the legal paperwork that says Aryaloka is a nonprofit. And it exists in relationships that are oriented around the common endeavor of Dharma practice and the goal of attaining enlightenment. Aryaloka, as it is, provides help to the world through the gift of the Dharma. The gift of the Dharma is the highest gift of the bodhisattva. In the list of things a bodhisattva can give to the world, the Dharma is the highest. And Aryaloka is a place where the Dharma can be given and the Dharma can be practiced. This is the highest gift. This is Aryaloka's highest purpose. And Aryaloka needs no justification of our good in the world beyond that. And yet, if people are hungry, they seek food. If people are unsheltered, they seek shelter. If people are in danger, they seek safety. Essential to the flourishing of the Dharma is a degree of stability in society, where basic needs are met, people are respected, and the truth is valued. And we only have that to some extent in the world. We only have that to some extent in the US. And there's a sense among many people that that has been corroding even further. That sense of stability has been corroding further. So it is often only those who have the stability and the leisure to search for deeper meaning that have the privilege of finding their way to a Dharma center and learning how to meditate and learning about Buddhist ethics and Buddhist spiritual community. There are, of course, exceptions to those conditions. I'm thinking of all the people that have found the Dharma in one of the worst places you can be, which is in prison. So there are exceptions to that reality, but in general, we need a sense of stability to turn around and say, what's all this mean? It's a little harder to do that sometimes, perhaps, when you're in the middle of the intensity of hunger. Things that are currently destabilizing in the public realm include the common struggle in relation to the cost of attaining our basic needs, the cost of education, the cost of healthcare, the devaluing of truth, the doubt in relation to history and to science, the demonization of particular populations of people and the resultant violence, the disparity between wealth and access, gun violence, climate change. These are all some of the destabilizing factors that are often in our news cycles. We all likely have our own list, and we all likely have our particular concerns, and we might be already putting energy into addressing those particular concerns. And with all those concerns, it's natural that we would look to our Sangha, to our spiritual home for support and for response, for a sense of connection and relevance. And yet responding as a community can often be complex, especially because some might see the problems or the solutions differently. I think that in relation to that, the sense that you can separate your Buddhist practice from your politics is a delusion. I think it is based in a sense of duality and a sense of othering. It's a privilege, it's a luxury that is often ignored. It's a denial of our interconnectedness. The Sangha is open to all people, including to those of various political opinion. We do our best in the Sangha not to other or polarize with those who have different political opinions than our own. We learn to practice patience and to communicate and even to disagree without seriously falling out. Nonetheless, there will be times when those of particular political beliefs or views of life will feel challenged by Buddhist tolerance. And they will either take the lesson and learn to embody that tolerance themselves, or they will other themselves from the Sangha. For example, someone who adheres to white supremacist ideology would find themselves challenged by Buddhist ethics, the spirit of Buddhist ethics. They would find themselves challenged by the spirit of unity and equality within the Sangha. And if they left, it wouldn't necessarily be on the Sangha. It wouldn't be the Sangha's fault that someone of that ideology did not feel welcome. And I'm reminded of the story of the fishmonger who took shelter in a flower shop overnight in a storm. And they couldn't sleep because the smell of the flowers was too sweet. So they put their stinking fish basket on their head in order to feel the safety of their what they were used to, and then get a restful sleep. So it's not always on the Sangha. There are some hateful ideologies that won't vibe with the love of the Sangha. There are those who think politics have no place in Buddhist communities, but I think that really depends on what you mean. Obviously, as a nonprofit, Aryaloka cannot and does not endorse political candidates. That's one easy example. On the other hand, I think we should be able to discuss matters of political import skillfully in the same way that we're learning to talk transparently in our close relationships about sex and money, right? There's several taboo subjects, several things in our world that are difficult to talk about, and politics is one of them. But surely we can learn how to do that skillfully. We can learn to analyze political issues based on our understanding of the Dharma, and to understand that the decisions we make as Buddhists to live a simple life and to care for our environment have political implications. So this is not easy, but I think it is delusive to think that our lifestyle choices as Buddhists are isolated from the political realm. Take the choice to be vegetarian or vegan, for instance. In the early 90s, vegan and vegetarian alternatives, meat alternatives, were not easy to find. But that industry grew to meet the needs of a growing population of folks who were choosing to eat less or no meat and dairy. This personal consumer choice gave rise to a massive industry. And it created strife between traditional meat and dairy industries and this new vegetable-based industry. And this strife ended up in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently, where it was upheld that you can indeed call almond milk instead of juice, which dairy lobbyists wanted to distinguish. So there you are, deciding to drink oat milk, minding your own business, and feeling quite separate from politics. And yet your little choice added up with other people's little choices and caused a substantial political, legal battle that a lot of people spent money on. So that's a relatively non-controversial example. These things get more complex and sometimes charged when you begin discussing race, gender, immigration, climate change, healthcare, etc. I do think we have to be able to have those conversations, and we have to learn to have those conversations skillfully. We have to, within our Sangha, maintain good faith with one another, and as long as it is safe, to stay in the room with one another. We have to understand that it does not always feel safe for people to have those conversations, and that sometimes I have to take on that it's me that contributes to that lack of safety. Despite my good intention, the impact might be quite different, and I have to learn to take that impact seriously and to own up to that impact as well as my intentions. Also, I think we, our Sangha, can learn about other spiritual communities around us who have more visible collective responses to suffering, how they navigate the tricky terrain of practical responses to suffering versus differences of opinion and approach. I'm not actually sure if it was originally a talk or an essay. It's in the Essential Sangharakshita. Sangharakshita says that in a short piece called A Buddhist Approach to World Problems, he points out that there's not a single Buddhist view in relation to world problems. There are a diversity of Buddhists and a diversity of views. You can have a Buddhist view of world problems, but not necessarily the Buddhist view of world problems. And he said, this talk or essay was likely written decades and decades ago. He said that because of globalization, our awareness of world problems is greater than it used to be. And of course now, on your social media feeds, on your newsletters that you get, in the news of the world, sometimes you are right there in the problems, seeing videos of the problems playing out. This can have a devastating effect. In relation to that, he says that our first response to world problems might be horrified anxiety or indignation. And then perhaps that's followed, when the energy of that is dissipated a bit, perhaps what follows is a sense of helplessness in relation to world problems. And as a reaction to that helplessness, we might withdraw. We might then look away. We might hide from world problems. And he suggests that that is not the skillful response, to try and shelter yourself away from world problems, which is not to say you can't go on retreat and take yourself out of those conditions to reset your nervous system and to take care of yourself. But he was talking more as a lifestyle choice, just to ignore world problems. He also suggests that world problems are the problems of the group, but that they can't be solved by the group. All that can be achieved is a balance of power between groups that is easily disrupted. He suggests instead that it is only on the individual level that one can make change, and that this is a long-term process. And he prescribes 4 courses of action in relation to that. And we're going to see how that individual effort turns into something more communal. So first of all, he stresses self-development. And here he specifically points out development of consciousness and a lifestyle that supports the development of consciousness, meaning not only our education, but quite specifically the development of meditative consciousness. Yeah. The second thing he recommends is joining a spiritual community. So I think most of us here check. Yeah, we've got both of those. We're part of a spiritual community. And the value here is in being with others that are also developing their individuality, developing their consciousness in a collective. The third thing he prescribes is to withdraw support from all groups or agencies that actually discourage, directly or indirectly, the development of the individual. What does that mean? What are the implications of that in the various societies and groups that we belong to? And then fourthly, to encourage the development of individuality within all the groups to which one unavoidably belongs. Yeah. And of course, the end result of the Buddhist view of individuality is us beginning to wake up, yeah, us beginning to see through delusive awareness into the real, what is real, breaking the fetters and becoming a true individual. And so with this happening, he envisions a network of spiritual communities gradually shifting the gravity of world affairs from the conflict of groups to the cooperation of communities. And he chooses an interesting image for this. He talks about us as many, many earthworms. And what we're doing as earthworms is that we're transforming the soil underneath the unhelpful structures of the group and undermining them. The slow work of undermining them over time and bringing something new into being. And he really emphasized that this was crucial to the survival not only of the Buddhist community, but he was really pointing to the survival of humanity. And this was him probably 40 or 50 years ago talking about this and seeing the dangers arising, especially as back then we were more and more aware of the dangers of nuclear annihilation. Yeah. So within our Sangha, you will find people carrying similar concerns as you and who are willing to work collectively to spark change. One small example of that is our regional participation. Portsmouth Buddhist Center and Aryaloka, we participate every year at Portsmouth Pride. So we have a booth every year at Portsmouth Pride, identifying ourselves as Buddhist and selling books and giving away pamphlets and that sort of thing. And many of us have also collectively walked in climate marches with a banner that identifies us as Buddhists. So those are a few small things, ways in which we reach out to others in our community to support and to encourage well-being, and also to promote the Dharma as a lifestyle and as a path of spiritual transformation that's open to all people. So there's nothing to stop like-minded Buddhists from participating together in projects that benefit others, or even in starting their own projects, or even their own nonprofits, such as Karuna Trust, which helps to raise money for ex-untouchable populations in India. And we have the good fortune of being connected in our Sangha to many Indian Buddhists who have benefited from the work of Dr. Ambedkar, who many consider to have been a living bodhisattva. And the example of Ambedkar in the Dhamma revolution to take the Dharma, and to take the Buddhist community and to use that energy and that momentum to create social projects and to even influence politics to help in the project of social uplift of people that were abused and intentionally kept in poverty. And he adopted this phrase, this slogan, to educate, agitate, and organize. This is an old slogan, and there's a lot of value in unpacking that, which we don't have the time to do today. But it's a wonderful example. Dr. Ambedkar and the Buddhist movement, that what is known as the Dhamma revolution, is a wonderful example of Buddhism having a social impact and making a real difference to the quality of life to hundreds of thousands of people. So all this being said, we also have the essential viewpoint of the First Noble Truth, that suffering is inherent in life. And from this, it implies that you can't fix samsara. There's always going to be world problems, right? You can't fix samsara at its own level. And yet, even with this knowledge, it doesn't mean we don't try. It doesn't mean we don't try and help and to make the world a better place, to make the world a place where the Dharma can be practiced freely and with great effect, and to create the conditions for people to be well and happy otherwise. So, this impossible task is embodied in the altruistic spirit of the bodhisattva to liberate all beings from suffering. It's an impossible task, and yet it embodies the spirit of compassion. These many arms on the Kuan Yin here represent that energy going out to the world. And yet the bodhisattva liberates all beings, though there are no beings to liberate. And the bodhisattva works in the world, but is not of the world. Yeah, these are some interesting ideals and ideas about the bodhisattva to inspire us in coming to terms with the suffering of the world, the impossible suffering of the world, and the incredibly positive task of trying to build a spiritual community in the face of it. So in focusing on today's topic of the Sangha as a force for good in the world, there are many wonderful and beautiful lists that I could have chosen to talk about that. And it's wonderful that there are so many ways in which we can talk about how we develop ourselves and express compassion in the world. It's one of the reasons I love Buddhism so much. There's so many dimensions of how to help. But I was inspired to talk about a list which enumerates the gifts of a bodhisattva. So here we are with this impossible task in the world of suffering, trying to help, trying to live a Dharma life. And if you become a Buddhist, to some extent, you're kind of signing up to be an aspiring bodhisattva, yeah. So we can think not only of established bodhisattvas as giving these things in the world, we can think of ourselves as growing into that and growing into those gifts and becoming benefactors ourselves. Is that the right use of that word? If you're a benefactor, you're giving, right? You're not receiving? Yeah, I got it. Okay. Just checking my grammar. So, and this begins with a discussion of generosity. Dana, or generosity, is the first perfection that a bodhisattva practices to develop themselves and to bring joy in the world and to establish the Dharma in the world. The value in generosity is that it's a direct contradiction of craving, and craving is the second noble truth, which is the root of suffering. We suffer because of craving. Craving seeks to acquire, whereas generosity seeks to give away. And given that craving is the source of suffering, it would follow that generosity is the beginning of true happiness. Therefore, generosity can be a very direct method of challenging and changing old habits around craving and selfishness. And it can be a very direct way to begin influencing and changing the world. So in our personal practice, we abstain from taking what is not given, and we practice generosity. And we recognize giving or generosity as a core expression of kindness, of metta. So this wonderful list behind me is what is given. What do we actually give? What are the gifts of a bodhisattva? And how is it relevant to today? Well, first of all, the first level of giving is material things and money. This is often a very direct way to be of assistance to others, whether it's people in your circle that you know are in need, or whether it's to a charity. And there's so much need right now across the board. So it's worth the extra effort to find good causes and to give what we can. The second level is to give time and energy. This might mean that we just value our friendships and we make the time to meet up with people. There's so much emphasis in our culture on doing, surviving, making money, being busy. What about just hanging out with your spiritual friends and talking? Yeah, so we really just need to make time for each other. Loneliness can also be really incredibly painful. And for some people, coming to the center once a week or once in a while might be their only social context. So why don't we make that bigger? Yeah. If we like someone that we meet within a Sangha context, go out to lunch, go for a walk. So we need to create a culture of friendship, and we can be helpful to our friends and family, and we can volunteer in various organizations that make a difference in the world, that help with the world's problems. So this is the second gift, the second level of giving of the bodhisattva, is to give our time and energy. The third is to give education, knowledge, and culture. So we've probably all become aware that good knowledge, good information is very valuable. It's critical. So it's on us to make sure our sources of info are good, are accurate, and that especially that they're not actively deceptive or mere conspiracy theories before we pass them along to other people or take them on ourselves. So we have to do a lot of fact checking these days because there's a lot of memes, there's a lot of headlines, there's a lot of, well, this study says this and that study says that. So what do you do with all of that? It's impossible to sort it all out. So you do your best to find an organization that helps you sort it out. What is accurate and what isn't? I often check Snopes. If I see a headline that doesn't seem quite right to me, I check Snopes, and that tells you whether it was something made up or whether it has relative accuracy. Anyway, there might be people that even think Snopes isn't correct. But it's on us to, as Buddhists, to have as clear and good information as we can. The spread of misleading information is a wildfire due to social media and how fast ideas can now gain traction. And that speed of transmission can also be used for good. So as much chaos and harm that the speed of transmission can cause these days with bad information, it can also do a lot of good with accurate information. So that's one level of giving knowledge that I thought was relevant to today's world. The other thing that I've benefited from in terms of receiving the gift of education and culture is in Triratna we have this very strong emphasis on the arts as a means of spiritual development and as a means of developing the imagination and the appreciation of beauty. The subtler influences of beauty can be lost in the intensity of the various medias that are present in our consumer culture these days and that are often growing in intensity. And so our sensibilities that respond more subtly to beauty could be numbed by that intensity. And so we have an opportunity in becoming meditators and in becoming Buddhists to reawaken that sensitivity and to value that and to share that value with other people. And at some level, it's just helpful to share basic knowledge with people. If you know how to garden, pass it along. Help your friend who doesn't know how to garden. If you know how to sew, help your friend who doesn't know how to sew. Whatever it might be, as an aspiring bodhisattva, you can give that knowledge, you can give that skill to other people. The fourth level of giving is fearlessness, the giving of fearlessness. So as people that are attempting to practice the Dharma, we've already developed a certain level of calm in our lives, and we need to be able to exemplify that as best we can for other people and to pass it along. We need to be honest about our fear and to do our best, not necessarily to avoid what we find frightening. And we can practice courageousness. We can practice virya, energy in pursuit of the good, and we can share that with other people. Our practice of metta, our practice of unconditional loving kindness, has a vibe. It makes us more trustworthy. There's a wonderful quote that's collected in a text called The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, which says, "A bodhisattva puts on armor in order to gather all beings around them. Since beings are infinite, so is the bodhisattva's armor." And that armor is metta. That armor is unconditional kindness. So that spirit can give others confidence, and it can embolden others. And I know in my own experience that I have experienced the gift of fearlessness from other people by sharing my insecurity with them. Next, we have the level of life and limb. Yeah, level of life and limb. This is a hard one to know how to talk about. I was thinking about how during the pandemic, many people risked their own health to help other people. I think that's one example of how you could take that on as a practice, yeah. But quite often when we're talking about the gift of life and limb, we might be talking about situations that we don't expect, where we have to respond to the lack of safety of another person in a way that we don't quite know how to handle. So I'm not gonna go into hypotheticals about that too much. But what will be our response if we witness violence or conflict? How do we respond to that, to diffuse it? What will our bodies do when we witness that? Or will we fight, flight, freeze, fawn? What will be the response of our nervous system to those situations? And just to go back to this reality that people have been yelled at in this neighborhood outside of car windows, what if that car stops? When I was a kid, I would get yelled at out of car windows quite a bit because me and all my punk friends got yelled at out of car windows. And it was always a relief to get yelled at and then to see the car keep going. But it was always terrifying to get yelled at and then to see the car stop slightly ahead of you. So what do you do as a protector, as a potential bodhisattva when the car stops? That is not an easy question. This is the level of life and limb. And then lastly, the gift of the Dharma. It's worth noting that one of the first things the Buddha did after he was enlightenment is he figured out how he was going to communicate that to other people. The spirit of it was that he immediately wanted to communicate that. to other people. And we all know there was a little drama with that, but in the end, he managed to communicate it. So the gift of the Dharma is right there at the beginning of the tradition. So in difficult times, in uncertain times, I think this gift just gains value. Yeah, this gift gains value. We can give the Dharma by exemplifying our practice. We don't necessarily have to teach the Dharma. We can just exemplify it in real time by practicing mindfulness and kindness. Yeah, so we can be an exemplar of Buddhist practice. And if you are called to teach, join a community, become a mitra, ask for ordination, train, yeah? Train to teach if you're called to do it. So, with these gifts, we can make a difference for ourselves and for others, within and without the Sangha. And we can do the slow earthworm work of creating a world where kindness and generosity are valued more than power and consumption, and where all beings can be well and happy, their needs met, and with plenty of leisure for the pursuit of beauty, truth, and goodness. So good luck in your giving. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah,
Seriously.
so
Really